Hey everyone, John Hendrix here of Boot Crew Media. Happy to be on the team. If you guys don't know anything about me, I'm your new Saints guy who's going to be able to have boots on the ground. I'm based out here in New Orleans. I am so excited to join up with these guys and tag team with Chris as well. But obviously, I follow football my whole entire life and have covered the Saints since pretty much the past decade, right? And so, if you're not familiar with my work, find it on Sports Illustrated. But obviously, here doing some video. And obviously, now the big point of emphasis is what's going to happen with the Saints. How are they going to draft? So let's kind of break down a few things here, right? And let's start here. Obviously, they hold the 16th pick, the 19th pick, then they have the 49th pick in the second round. So day one, let's start there. The great debate obviously ensues. What are they going to do? Are they going to do an offensive lineman? Are they going to do a wide receiver? Or are they going to do quarterback? Let's kind of look at each position and just kind of break down some thoughts, right? Of those offensive line, I think what's going to be telling there is how much do they believe in James Hurst as the guy at left tackle, right? I think this is an area that is going to kind of answer itself here because look, there are popular, mock drafts that have potentially Evan Neal, Charles Cross if he falls. I like Trevor Penning a lot out of Northern Iowa. I think he can do extremely well in this offense, and so I really think that that would be an area where the Saints can get better. But I also would say if they believe in James Hurst, that's not going to be surprising to me either, right? And so I think that's the big question mark. Maybe they look on day two like a Darian Kennard out of Kentucky. That could be a potential guy that could fit on tackle or guard potentially. So that's really going to be the big thing. And I think that's where you invest in Jameis Winston, obviously, and which kind of brings up to the quarterback position. Let's put it this way. None of the quarterbacks that are drafted in here in day one, day two, none of them should be starting on day one. I think that's just the biggest thing that you got to take away. Now, in the Saints situation, you got Jameis Winston. You sign him to a pretty good contract, 2 year, $28 million. You build in a lot of incentives into his deal, right? And so, what I mean by that is it behooves him to play extremely well. There's playoff contract clauses. There's all sorts of bonuses involved with, his overall performance. If he gets to the Pro Bowl, all these types of things. So it's not like, you look at signing a guy like Jameis Winston and be upset about that. So if they were to look at like Liberty's Malik Willis or Pitt's Kenny Pickett or anything like that, or Sam Howell, Matt Corral, on any of those guys, I mean, they're going to sit on the bench for at least a year, right? And Jameis's deal is 2 years, and obviously they could get out of that after this year, but they signed Andy Dalton for a reason. He's a more than capable veteran backup. He's going to be somebody that comes in here and look, I'd say is really good insurance plan to Jameis Winston. Hopefully he doesn't get hurt. Hopefully we get to see on full display how he's going to be because here's the other thing you got to realize. Obviously there's no Sean Payton. You've got Pete Carmichael that's going to come run the offense, and they've been very, very point blank about it. This should be the same offense that this team has ran for the past 16 years. So that's kind of what we're expecting here. But look, you look at quarterback again. I could understand why that would make sense. Again, I'm not a personal fan of that just because I think there's other needs elsewhere that need to be met. Particularly wide receiver, which brings us to the next one that we want to talk about, right? So you're going to get Michael Thomas back. He's going to be on a tear, guys. He's going to be somebody who's laser focused on trying to regain that 2019 form. He hasn't played a football in a long time. I'm eager to see what he does with Jameis Winston this season. I think it's going to bring a lot of promise here. But outside of that, you bring back familiar characters, right? You bring back Traquan Smith, Deontay Hardy locked up on his restricted free agent guy tender. And so you look at that and Marquez Callaway, there's some room to grow there, right? They need a legitimate number two. And if anything, to just push the depth chart, right? I think Callaway can grow in the offseason, but overall, you look at that wide receiver core, and again, it's just one that even with Thomas in the equation, I just don't think it scares anybody, right? And so you're looking at 19 because walking through it, let's just play it out. 16, you can probably get yourself the offensive lineman that you need. Now, the Chargers are right behind you at 17, so they're a team that needs an offensive lineman. So if the Saints don't take one at 16, then I guarantee the Chargers will take one at 17. Then you've got the Eagles picking right in front of the Saints for before 19's pick. That could probably go a couple of different ways. I expect him to come along with a wide receiver, which sets the Saints up for getting another good wide receiver in this draft. Chris Salave has been a popular one. I could see Drake London if he lasts. Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. I mean, there's going to be a lot of them. I don't think Jameson Williams is going to fall, but that remains to be seen. So First round, I think offensive lineman and wide receiver probably makes the most sense. There are other arguments to be made. I mean, obviously, the team's going to have to address some needs at safety simply because right now, the way things have played out, you have Marcus May, who might be facing a suspension based off of his DUI, something that happened a while back. And then obviously, you brought back PJ Williams, and then CJ Gardner Johnson is more of your slot guy. So you look at that and the guys past that, which is Daniel Sorensen, he's going to be more of your Jeff Heath type role for this season. And then you also have JT Gray, which is a special teams ace, not necessarily a guy that you always have to play at safety, but he does fill in sometimes. And then Justin Evans, which I think is intriguing. He was a huge hit with Tampa when he was there, been out of football for a little bit. So he's looking to make a comeback. But, that's going to be one of those situations where we talked to Mickey Loomis on Wednesday, and they're going to still have to fill out their roster with free agents and obviously undrafted process. So they still got to get to the 90-man roster limit. And so it'll be interesting to see if they do bring back a Tyrann Mathieu that they've visited already with. And so, or even a Jarvis Landry. I don't see Landry as much, but I do see Mathieu as a potential option just because of where they're at, and opens a door where they could look at a safety early, or they could look at it on day 2, day 3, and still come away with somebody who's going to provide some good quality depth. The other positions that I'd say that you look at is linebacker, something that not many people are really talking about, but could potentially make sense, right? Is linebacker is one of those areas where I think this year would be more of a luxury than a commodity that they have to have that. And the simple reason is Demario Davis is still playing lights out. I mean, even with age, this guy's proven that age is just a number. Pete Warner is going to presumably start alongside him. That's the reason why you haven't seen Quan Alexander re-signed yet, and it's interesting that his market's really quiet too. So I think he's going to be one of those players that has to wait until the draft process plays out to find his next team. But after that, the depth leaves a lot to the imagination for the Saints, and so that's why I think you can look at a linebacker as early as 49, 98 would make a ton of sense too, just because do you try to go find out that Demario Davis replacement and let him play behind for the next couple seasons? And then obviously you just want to make sure that you have some quality depth there, because most of the guys behind him, Zach Bond, Caden Ellis, most of those are special teams guys. Ellis played a little bit more in base defense and such, but again, that's something that you got to look at for sure. Running back, I think the case can be made that you need a running back, and here's why. Alvin Kamara, his legal proceedings got pushed back to August. So that's going to eventually catch up, because if he does come with some league discipline, he could be in a Deontay Hardy situation like last year, where it's later in the season where he gets suspended and such. So something to keep an eye on there. But look, you got Mark Ingram, then you lost Ty Montgomery. That didn't really work out the way that the Saints wanted to, if you will. And so you got Dwayne Washington, and then obviously you got Tony Jones Jr., who was really impressive in training camp and preseason, but he just kind of fell off in the season. He just didn't do anything like we thought he would. And so what I would tell you is it wouldn't surprise me if they go day 2, day 3 to look at a running back, somebody that can complement Ingram and Kamara is basically, especially if there's a suspension. And look, there's two schools of thought. You can get somebody who's like Ingram or somebody who's like Kamara, but there's a situation obviously where if you get somebody like Kamara, then it's a good plug and play type of a thing. And then look, I would expect them at minimum, they're going to add a couple through the undrafted process. It's just how it happens. And the only other option that they have on a roster is Josh Adams, a reserve future guy. And so those pan out, sometimes they don't. And so look, going into the draft, there's a lot of things that could happen. Corner is another area. I don't expect it early, but corner is an area where you got to address some things. Look, just because you got the big trio of Lattimore, Roby, and Paulson Adebo. But after that, again, another drop off like you see at safety, or drop off like you see at linebacker. It's just not there. And so when you look at across the roster, I think the most solidified position has got to be on the defensive line. Defensive edge, or edge rusher, defensive end, however you want to chalk it up, is loaded. They got all the talent there, and they even added to it with Taco Charlton. We'll see. It's going to be tough to try to beat out some of these other ones to make the roster. But, when we talked to him when he got signed, he said that, look, he's just looking forward to being able to be a traditional end in a 4-3 defense. And so maybe he does show some flashes of that brilliance and that people saw in him in the first round when he was drafted. So we don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. And then defensive line, some people have talked about defensive tackle potentially. I mean, I could see it just because David Onyemata, even when he came back from suspension, he just wasn't the same dominant player that I think we were expecting to see. And so I think there's a case to be made that maybe you look at one of the Georgia guys as far as a defensive tackle, but it's going to be pretty telling because again, they have depth there. They have Jaleel Johnson they've signed. They re-signed Jalen Dalton. They obviously re-signed Shai Tuttle, restricted free agent. They added Kentavious Street. So there's a lot of mouths to feed there. And again, I like the competitiveness of it. And one thing you're going to get with Dennis Allen's defense is pretty much a strong product defensively. I think obviously most of the attention here is on offense, but it's going to be very telling where the Saints go and how they address. Again, talking with Mickey Loomis on Wednesday, I don't expect him to trade back. I think if anything, they would really like to stay put. He's talking about going through some of these mock simulations with Jeff Ireland and kind of their front office. And really, he said those are more like worst case scenarios, or as Jeff Ireland put it from what Loomis said, doomsday devices or doomsday scenarios, where basically, if all their players do go off, then this is what we might be looking at, right? And just kind of playing that out from a mock draft perspective on their board. So really, they still said that, hey, they feel good about who they can come away with at 16 and 19. I think they are going to be able to make some good headway there. And the biggest thing I think is when you look at how they address these first two picks, it's going to create some leniency. And just remember on day two, that's usually where they find a lot of these better players. I mean, Alvin Kamara was one, Pete Werner, Paulson Adebo, just some to name a few. There's still a lot of talent out there. And I think where these classes are really deep, wide receivers, one of them, some of the offensive linemen are really deep too. And so you could see and make the case, although I think guys like Jameson Williams, Chris Salave, Garrett Wilson, they're so many of these first round receivers that can make such an impact from day one. The other guys on day two, like Christian Watson, North Dakota State University, or Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, or Sky Moore, Western Michigan, those guys can still do it. And the Saints would be happy. And I'm a fan of doubling up on wide receiver just because you need to push that depth chart a little bit. But at any rate, we'll see how it all unfolds. Be sure to follow us at Boot Crew Media and then follow me on Twitter at John J. Hendrix. I'll be there at the practice facility in Metairie the whole 3 days, just kind of seeing how things operate and just, we'll be there in attendance and, shout out to the Saints for feeding us and hosting us because the past couple of years have been riddled with COVID. So we haven't been able to do that, but this is the first of many to come. Get used to seeing me, get used to seeing his face. And whether that's a good thing or bad thing, it really don't matter because I'm going to bring it to you and bring all the Saints stuff that you desire and crave. So thanks, guys. As always, appreciate it. Thanks so much. Have a good one.